Welcome to The Audience Connection. This is the podcast where we focus on how businesses can create content that builds more genuine connections with their audience.
Each episode, we dive into the art and science of storytelling, speaking with the sharpest minds in brand, marketing, and creative storytelling.
Our guests share their strategies, insights, and creative choices that made their audiences care.
Brought to you by Casual, the video partner for global brands. With offices in the US, EMEA, and APAC,
Casual leverages the art and science behind creating impactful stories to drive business results for their clients.
we're your hosts. I'm Lydia Chan.
And I'm Ollie Atkinson. This is The Audience Connection.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. In this episode, we dive into one of the most relevant tensions facing modern storytellers, the balance between art versus data. I'm sharing with you a panel discussion I moderated last year with Shveta, a seasoned executive producer, and Jennifer Apy, a 30-year marketing veteran. We look at what happens when storytelling becomes constrained by algorithms and benchmarks. What's lost when content becomes, too templated? And how can we use data, though, to elevate the effectiveness of creativity instead of stifling it? This conversation will give you a fresh perspective on the evolving intersection of art versus analytics. Let's get into it. Hi, everyone. I'm Lydia. I'm the managing director of Casual here in the US. And I am joined by, and I'll let our panelists introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Apy. I am a partner with Chief Outsiders, which is one of the largest chief marketing officer, chief sales officer firms where we go into companies part-time in order to help them head up their marketing or their sales.
And I'm Shveta. I am a creative turned marketer. I was the television producer for over a decade. And then I transitioned into doing content marketing for companies and am now working with a number of clients, including Autodesk, which is where I found Casual.
Amazing. All right, guys. So this panel is about data versus art, right? So we know, marketing has always been a very data-driven environment department, while content has always been focused on storytelling. But more and more nowadays, the data is driving how we tell those stories. When I was flying up today, I was listening to a podcast about psychedelics. It's relevant, I promise. And so they were talking about how basically as humans, we compartmentalize, right? So we create these frameworks of thinking and, it allows us to obviously survive. And with, data-driven kind of marketing, we're starting to see how that kind of affects how we create content, right? So such as benchmarks, like you have to capture the audience in 3 seconds, right? Or, when you're doing an interview, you have to show the person's face within 10 seconds of the video, right? So it's like, how is this affecting the way that we're looking at creativity? And where the psychedelics come in is that it helps us break out of that framework, right? So in this panel, we're gonna try to sort of see how, I guess, we can bridge the gap between data and storytelling. So I think let's start with, how has storytelling changed, over the past, I put 10 years here, but really 5 years, because it's just changed so much. And I'd like to start with you, Shveta.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. When I started my career in television, it feels like the Stone Ages, where it was ads and live TV, and now it's content on demand. I think in the last 5 years we have just sort of become, I'm trying to use a different word than slave, but slaves to the algorithms. I'm trying to use a more politically correct term, where you're creating content for all these different platforms wherever you want to attract your customers. And you're trying to follow the rules. Oh, I have to get them in 3 seconds. Oh, it can't be longer than this. Oh, and it's dizzying, and the rules keep changing. And I think in the past 5 years, that acceleration has gotten dizzying. And you can truly lose yourself and lose the art of storytelling in all of the rule following. So, I mean, I think that the tension has gotten even worse in the past 5 years.
What do you
I
think?
can definitely say that the human side of storytelling has not changed. But it's becoming harder and harder to make that connection. And so I think that when you only have 5 seconds, or when you only have that little sound bite, it's harder and harder to tell your story. So as a growth marketer, we're measured on our results, right? How much engagement did we get? How many views did we get? Et cetera, et cetera. So in order to be able to engage that audience, you have to work even harder to tell that story. And part of it is understanding your audience, who you're telling the story to, and how you're going to make that connection. And part of it is making sure that you're working with a partner, somebody who really knows how to tell stories in all formats and all channels, no matter what the constraint is, right? So I think that's one thing that hasn't changed about storytelling, is it really is about that human connection. But finding it, developing it, and delivering it is really hard nowadays.
So, do you think that there has been a decline in quality of storytelling?
Well, okay, a couple of things. There is fantastic storytelling out there. We are in, it's like an embarrassment of riches, right? I mean, just think about what you could watch tonight. There's so much content. I think the world has become a much noisier place. I do think with brands doing storytelling, I mean, some brands do a beautiful job. You guys do a beautiful job, but the quality of storytelling, I mean, I think is definitely suffering. It's definitely, it gets a little clickbaity where I've captured them in 3 seconds, but then there's not really the content behind that to support my attention. But I wouldn't say that it's suffered everywhere. There's still people doing beautiful work.
Yeah. I definitely have seen a decline in the quality of content. I work for both consumer as well as B2B companies, and everybody has a content marketing program nowadays. I don't think there's any marketing department that doesn't have about content. The thing is, people think that a content marketing program is about volume. How many pieces did we put out this week? How many videos can we get out this month? And it's not about the quality. So I think that with these AI tools, right, where you can produce quality pretty fast, you've got people who don't know who their audience is and they don't know how to tell a story. So there's a lot more stuff out there that we have to fight against that's just not great.
I agree. And I'll add one thing, going back to what Nick said at the beginning about empathy. I find often what's lacking is the empathy there for your customer and whatever problem you're trying to help them address. It's that I find often is missing.
So how do we break through this, right? How do we as like storytellers convince marketers to say, hey, let's invest in this maybe better piece of content, but also do the other pieces of content, right? How do we start to make that case?
You want to take that as a growth marketer? I'll give you my point of view. All right. So when I'm working with a client trying to figure out what's going to really be cost effective and cost efficient in a marketing program, what we're looking for is, who is that customer and how do they buy? Simply put, who is the customer and how do they buy? And I think a lot of people miss that. And when you miss that, you're going to miss the human element, right? You're going to miss the connection. So we always start with, who is the customer? How do they buy? And what do they care about? What do they care about? Do they know they have a problem? If they don't know they have a problem, what are they going to care about that you can tell them that's going to help start that relationship so that they can realize that they really do have a problem? Right. So it's really understanding, who is the customer, how do they buy, and where are they at, and how do you meet them where they are in order to be able to start that conversation. And I think that when you look at it that way, it's a very human analysis, right? When you look at it that way, then all of a sudden the content path becomes clearer. How do you develop that content that's really going to connect and really going to have that emotional connection? Because you're actually speaking to humans and trying to help humans solve their problems.
I agree wholeheartedly. To me, the way I think about it is always customer first. And if you are fighting to create a piece of content and your argument is centered around, hey, this is what our customers want, this is what they don't know, this is what we need to tell them about, it's a much easier argument to make, especially if you have some data to back it up. Like, this is what we've heard. Those conversations generally tend to go very smoothly, and those budgets tend to get approved. Yep.
Yeah. So Jen, in our previous conversations, you talk a lot about the customer journey, right? Can you give us a little bit of insights, recommendations around what type of storytelling works where in the customer journey?
So usually my process for trying to figure this out is I'll talk to customers or prospects directly. What was the problem you were trying to solve? How did you go about trying to solve it, and really understand what channels they're in, what messages resonate, what language do they use to talk about their problem or to talk about the solution that they're looking for. Maybe another insight is asking them when they made the decision, what were they evaluating? So when you have all of those insights and you have an idea of where they're shopping, where they're consuming information, who is the authority in that conversation, maybe it's a friend or a colleague. Once you have an understanding of that person as a human and how they try to solve their problems, then you can start to think about, okay, what are some of the messages that I can give to them? What are some of the value adds? What are the things of value that I can just give to them? They can start that relationship, that conversation. And then as they get to know my brand, or as they get to know more about their problem and how they can solve it, how do I continue that conversation so that I build trust? So the customer journey is about trying to intercept. I have a whole framework for relevant intercepts, which is great for content marketing, actually. But what is that relevant intercept that's going to start that conversation? And then how do you develop that relationship that's eventually going to create a trusting relationship that's going to get them to buy?
So Shveta, when you look at these different points in the customer journey, and specifically like platform specific kind of best practices, can you talk a little bit about your experience in that space? Like, what type of content works on what platforms? What should people keep in mind?
As much as I don't love it, the rule about catching their attention early does hold. You're not going to get on every platform. You're not going to get around that one. I think the shorter social platforms, they offer a great opportunity to give tastes. I've seen them be very effective in driving people to go to other destinations. But you have to be, quick and energetic. Generally, it is not. I'm not looking at the Instagrams and the Facebooks and et cetera for the deep storytelling. I think YouTube is a better platform for the longer. People want to hang out with your content longer. I still think the catch them at the beginning is very important. But I think, people kind of always obsess about the length. Oh, it can't be more than 3 minutes. It can't be, and it drives me nuts because, actually, while I was at Autodesk, I kind of wanted to throw this out the window. It didn't seem real to me. And we did a bunch of videos in varying lengths, and we found that the drop off, the percentage was always around the same. It was between 40 and 50%. I can't remember the exact percentage. So if you made a longer video, that just meant they watched for longer. It didn't mean that you only got them, they only stuck around for 2 minutes no matter what. Which was something to keep in mind when making the content, because a longer video may not actually, as long as it wasn't costing a lot more, it may be worth it because you were capturing their attention for longer. So, I think it's important to sort of like push some of those rules as well. And that is definitely one I will argue with. I think the story needs to be as long as the story needs to be. It shouldn't drag. And I think going back to distribution on any of these platforms, even if you're following all the rules, paid is such a big, you have to pay to play. People are not going to find your content if you're not distributing and putting paid behind it these days. So.
Yeah, for sure. Can you talk a little bit more about that 40 to 50% drop off? So are you saying, you know, like if we produce the 5-minute video, it's dropping off at 50%. We're producing a 3-minute video, it's dropping off at 50%.
Yeah. And I mean, this was just one discrete set of content that I was making at that time. But yes, we found it to be very consistent. And it was it was a slow drop off. It wasn't like everyone dropped off at 43%. It's sort of, that's when you started to see. So yeah, and we had, like an 8-minute we had some longer pieces just because those stories required more time to tell, but they were, yeah.
So that's really interesting. That's almost like, in the creation, right? In the story arc somewhere, where in the middle, like the way that we're telling these stories is just, the audience is done with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's when they started to drop off. A lot of people still stay till the end, but, it's sort of, people stay till they get to, I guess we didn't break down all the arcs. Like, was there a pivotal moment that was happening right at the, they were all so different, to be honest. It's not like they were all customer stories, or they were all very different pieces of content. I don't know that we could have mapped it like that, but it did, it still drives me crazy when someone's like, oh, I can't be more than 3 minutes, well, it could, we could try it. It shouldn't if the story does not warrant it, but, give the story, give yourself time to tell the story properly, but hook them in the first 3 seconds.
Yeah, for sure. We still get that question all the time. How long should this video be? And then they tell us 90 seconds because that's kind of the standard now. Yeah, that's the popular one. So I guess, how can we really use data to create more engaging storytelling? Like, where can we really optimize data to drive the stories versus these standard, almost templated ways of creating the story? If that makes sense.
Well, I do want to say that one of the things about data is that it's not fact. And this is one of the things I always remind my team when we're evaluating the performance of, whatever channel or campaign or content that we're working on, is it's not fact. We don't know why they dropped off. We don't know, if 5 people viewed it and 1 person viewed it 3 times, we don't necessarily know if they were engaged in it or if they just missed it the first time or they couldn't hear it, right? There's lots of stuff we don't know. So I would say that data is not fact, but it could be directional. So for example, if you're A/B testing something and you can get a relative read on engagement or plays, or, that you can act on, right? That's data that you might be able to act on. But, really trying to understand the human side of it. I always like to ask people and get actual feedback as they're viewing it. So not just taking the data as it is, but also trying to gain some insights around it too, to really understand what it is. Is it that they weren't engaged, or is it that we did such a good job in the first 15 seconds, they didn't need to watch anymore? Like, that could be another reason for drop off. So always asking the question and really trying to understand it from a holistic human level is important when looking at the data. It's not just data for data's sake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like to I agree with everything Jen said, and I like to also use, kind of prioritize where I want to use my data and what I want to learn from it. Like it is good to track when do people start falling off. I also, it's not just about that hero piece of content. I love testing the promotional pieces of content, and often that's also can be a little more cost effective to create different social cuts, test them on different platforms, see what resonates where. That's a much easier proposition than having 2 hero pieces and doing that. And it also tells you something about your audiences on those platforms if you do it, consistently, and you get a good data set, and you know exactly what you're testing. This one I want really fast edits and it's snappy, and this one I want it to be more slow. If you know exactly what you're going for. I also think it can be very helpful in understanding what kinds of stories your audiences are looking for, how things perform, especially if you're, again, in distribution, sort of being fair and equal in how you're distributing things. I have found data to be really helpful directionally there as well.
Another thing to keep in mind is that the data will always, it's ever changing as well, right? So the platforms are changing, but also just like, I feel like we're also influenced by what we see on social, what's popular on TikTok, et cetera, right? That it changes the way, audiences view what brands are putting out there. And the challenge for us as storytellers is, how do we break through that mold, right? How do we, to go full circle, be on psychedelics and like think outside that norm, that box, to engage with our audiences, right? I don't know who here likes to watch the cake videos where it's like it's a pencil and then but really it's a cake because they slice it and no what? Yes, thank you. But it's because our brain is seeing it as whatever, a toaster, right? So then once it cuts into a cake, it breaks that mold, and we're surprised, right? We're like, that is an engaging piece of content. And I think as storytellers, we need to find those clever ways, or just those like really, I don't know, like things that humans can connect with that surprise us. We can't have a panel without talking about AI, or just any conversation without talking about AI. So what's AI's influence in all this now and in the future? What do you guys think?
Well, first of all, AI, all those recommender engines, those are all a form of rudimentary AI, right? Recommending what you're going to watch next. At some point, these platforms and algorithms are going to get faster, such that the recommendation is going to be so seamless. You're not going to realize that you're watching something different than the next person over. And the reason why it's changing is because of something you did in the past. And I'm sure these tools actually use this nowadays. They're looking at your eye movements and they're trying to see if you're engaged or not, and they're trying to find a way to engage you, right? So I think that technology is going to help with hyper relevance for an individual.
Mm-hmm. That sounds cool. I'm going to talk about something totally different.
It sounds kind of scary.
I mean, it sounds creepy cool. I think in the time of AI, I mean, it's scary, right? Like how even if you just ask it to spit out things for you, like with a prompt, I think the human touch to storytelling is going to become so much more important. And I think it's also going to be important. I think it's very easy to fall victim to, we've seen this is what works on this platform, so we have to do it just this way. And then, that might be fine. You're following the rules on that platform, but then you kind of look like everybody else. I think in the time of AI, it's going to be even more important not to just to not be like fear motivated that I have to follow all these rules or I will fail to sort of think outside the box and think about like, okay, how can I not follow some of the rules, where it won't hurt my performance, but it'll make me stand out and it'll serve my story better. Because I think that's going to get even worse in the time of AI, because it's all about patterns and recreating those patterns. And you don't want to just be another pattern.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's just going to flood the market with very samesies type content. Well, thank you both so much for giving us your insights and advice and thoughts. Any final thoughts as we wrap up this panel?
I think we started this panel talking about data versus art, and I think that where we've converged is it is about data and art together, but not forgetting the human aspect of it, because ultimately that's going to be what creates that connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say too that just never forget about the empathy for your audience in whatever you make. And AI can never replicate that. Right. And yeah, use data in smart ways. Don't let it just completely dictate everything you do.
Awesome. Well, let's give Jen and Shveta a hand. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Audience Connection podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. If you'd like to connect with me about how I can help you tell better stories and connect better with your audiences, drop me a note, lydia@casualfilms.com. We'll be back with more episodes soon. See you next time.